I would have a very hard time falling asleep at night. And my number one thought would be, is this going to work? Should I be applying for jobs? It's the pressures of the people around you that that start eating away at you because, my parents were getting worried. Like my girlfriend at the time was getting worried. Like people are kind of encouraging you to always take the safe route. And it's in those outer months where it starts to feel like really risky to people. My emotional state it went up and down based on daily sales, to be honest. I mean, I did beat myself up, and many people told me to like get a side job, quit, do something else, pivot into this or that. But you're kind of going to have actually a strong negativity network, in my opinion. And I always got irritated, and I still do, whenever someone's like suggestion is like, oh, like, why don't you just hire a PR agency? Like, connect with this person. Like, they're reasonably priced. They're 15 grand a month. I'm like, what do you think this
No way.
is?
Behind the Hustle. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Behind the Hustle, the show where we fight back against success porn on social media. If you're anything like me, you're sick and tired of being bombarded with endless success stories, and you know they're just the tip of the iceberg. I interview successful entrepreneurs about the realities of their journey, the setbacks and failures, mental health consequences, and most importantly, how they endured for a long time before ultimately finding success. No matter where you are in your entrepreneurial journey, hopefully this is a reminder to you that you're not alone when things get dark and a source of motivation for you to keep going. My guest today is Andrew Buehler. Andrew is the founder of Urban Smokehouse, a direct-to-consumer e-com brand selling mail-order, ready-to-eat, fall-off-the-bone tender barbecue. Launching with just an idea and a Kickstarter campaign, Andrew has grown the business to $300,000 per month in sales in just 2 years. But it didn't come easy. Andrew is here today to dig into the gritty early days of building his company and just how much he had to figure out on his own to make it happen. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk the realities of starting your own business.
Thanks, man. So I think we can start here. Can you talk a little bit about specifically what your company does and how you're able to preserve product quality in an e-commerce context?
Yeah, sure. It's fairly simple, honestly. So we pre-cook all of our foods. So we currently sell pork baby back ribs, beef brisket, and pulled chicken, and all of it's made low and slow, so at a low temperature over many hours. Briskets take, north of 12 hours. The ribs can take, 4 to 5 hours. Chicken's kind of similar in a similar time frame to ribs. After it's cooked, it's immediately vacuum sealed. It's essentially flash frozen, immediately moved to a freezer. Once it's then, reaches a frozen temperature, it's packed on pallets and sent to a cold storage facility where ultimately it'll then be divvied up for individual orders. So, send 2 ribs to Ed, 10 chickens to Andrew, whatever that may be. The process of preservation is honestly just about cooking it the right way the first time. So, not taking shortcuts. We are actually cooking these things for multiple hours. And that's kind of the value prop. It's really a convenience piece. I don't think that these recipes are particularly challenging to make, but they are particularly burdensome to make. And so it's you want to make dinner in 15 minutes, starting at 6 a.m., a 12-hour brisket that you serve at 6 p.m. is not a decision that most people make. It kind of it kind of has a culture to it, or people that are passionate about making it. That is a much smaller subset than those who enjoy to consume it. So we're making the larger population of those who enjoy to consume it, but would never consider making it themselves accessible and putting it on the menu for any meal because it now can be made in a relatively short time frame that I would associate with quick and easy dinner.
When you put it that way, it seems like a pretty obvious gap or problem that you're solving. But if I like think back to before you started this business, if someone pitched this to me, I'd be like, I don't know. Like, is there a big market for barbecue? Presumably, some other people are already doing this. It's like a passionate niche community, but people want to cook it themselves. And if they want to if they want barbecue and they don't want to cook it for themselves, they maybe get it by going on a trip to like the South or something like that. So I want to get into like how you formulated the idea. Why did you think this would be compelling and how did you think about competition?
Yeah, so I think originally, the thought came out of COVID and just seeing progressively more and more packages piling up in the lobby of every single apartment building you walk into. We were all stuck at home and we're all spending more money online. There also was this like new fear forming of going to stores for some people and people wanting to buy products they historically didn't buy online. Online grocery delivery has always been a thing. It's been around since the 90s with like services like Peapod, but ultimately, I think there was a large barrier because a lot of people wanted to hand select their produce and their meats in person. Pick up 5 apples and choose the one that's the ripest or the less bruised or the least bruised, or pick up, a couple steaks and compare them and see which one in their eyes is the highest quality rather than trusting a random a random guy that's pick and packing it for them. COVID caused a natural kind of like rapid adaptation curve in purchasing proteins and fruit and vegetables on the internet out of fear. I think we all can agree there's been a long growth story in e-com, and it's not going away. But I kind of saw a subcategory that was growing really quick, and it was in food, and particularly the items that people normally like to select themselves rather than it doesn't matter. They're agnostic to who chooses it. I don't care who picks up my bag of Lay's or Cheez-Its because it's a packaged good. It's the same, but meat, fruit, and vegetables, I might want to hand select. And so, kind of with that theme identified, there then was just a natural overlay with my passions. I was the head of the grilling society in high school. I started a barbecue club in college where I would do a full hog roast once a year for the entire school. I lived in New York and I had a career in finance, but one of the things that drew me to New York and what draws a lot of people to New York is just the access to like phenomenal global cuisine from around the world. You can have, the best Italian food on Tuesday, the best Indian food on Wednesday, the best Nepali food on Thursday, and there's 10 options in each category minimum. And so I'd always been passionate about food, but I didn't really know how to enter the industry given it's a large industry dominated by large multinationals that have been doing it for, some of them 100 years. And so I saw this kind of niche growing in online grocery delivery and thought that maybe my young blood and familiarity with social media and kind of just more modern marketing techniques and being an internet user could give me a slight edge in developing a business there. It wasn't that I was certain that it was going to succeed, but it was a natural overlap. And hey, I think this market's growing and it's not going anywhere. I love food, and I think I can be a little bit of an internet whiz kid versus the 65-year-old General Mills executive or Kraft Heinz executive who probably doesn't have a TikTok account and maybe has an Instagram account with 100 followers and 0 posts and not a profile picture.
To dig in there a little bit, so you saw e-commerce exploding during COVID, particularly by people buying perishable food online. My issue is like, presumably that's not enough to start a business. That's compelling, but there was this COVID spike across a ton of industries that ultimately
Totally.
subsided. There were a number of businesses that got started and whole sectors that cropped up because COVID happened. And then people were like, oh, behavior is going to change forever. And then ultimately behavior didn't change forever. People stopped washing their hands as much as they did during COVID. And a lot of those sectors went away, or just the growth story that was underwritten was like way off from what actually materialized. Did you even think about that, or how confident were you that it would work?
So there's three things I want to touch on there actually. One is I think there are some industries that was a little bit more obvious that it was a out of nowhere spike. And probably the biggest one I can think of is like face masks. It
At the
went
same
from
time.
everyone in their house had multiple boxes of face masks. And if you didn't have a face mask, you could pretty confidently ask the guy to your left or right for a face mask and they had an extra one. That level of market penetration is definitely dissipated and I think was probably a little bit more obvious going into COVID that was a truly abnormal spike, or we went from very little adaption to almost 100% adaption. Whereas a category like food, people got to eat. I'd argue food's the oldest industry. It's food, water, and shelter, the three things you need to live. Most people eat 3 meals a day. Some people only eat one, but ideally, people are going to eat every day for their entire life. And so it was less about is this industry going away? It was more about can you challenge large multinational players that have way more scale than you? That was the big question I was having rather than is this a temporary surge in demand? I kind of believed that e-com was sticking around and the product wasn't going anywhere just because you quite literally need it to live. If you don't eat for 2 or 3 weeks, you die. If you don't wear a face mask or wash your hands, you might be a little bit more dirty, but you're probably still going to be alive. The question I then also had, which I think, I actually wanted to talk about a little bit on this show, is I think a lot of people when they approach entrepreneurship, they think of ideas that are super, super grand and they want to be super disruptive and they want to invent a category or completely revolutionize a category. And they're looking for ideas that are multi-billion dollar opportunities. And I can unpack why I do actually believe this is a multi-billion dollar opportunity, but I didn't go in saying I need to make $1 billion. There are new restaurants that open every day, and there are restaurants that close every day. There are new laundromats that open every day and close every day. There are a lot of basic, boring businesses that are forms of entrepreneurship that open every day. I wasn't looking to, hire 1,000 people and change the world. I was looking to develop a life I would enjoy more. And a life I would enjoy more was a life building something on the internet where I wasn't tied to a specific geographic location and a desk every day. And I kind of said, hey, if I can make the same amount of money I am in my current life, or maybe a little bit more, but make my life and day significantly more rewarding, this is a win. It's
Yeah.
gravy on top if it can be a massive success. And I think there's an opportunity for it to be a massive success, but that's really kind of an upside case. The base case was just, can I make my life more fulfilling?
What I think is really salient about that point is that line of thinking has already de-risked your business massively. It's de-risked not necessarily the business itself, but it's de-risked your time. You've set the bar quite low to be able to survive. And I'm guilty of this. A lot of people start their journey in entrepreneurship without that line of thinking, going really grand. And it creates a lot of pressure. It clouds their judgment. It's impressive that your first venture, you were able to have that line of thinking, because a lot of people don't do that. And more people would probably be successful if they did.
Yeah, and I think on that note too, I think a lot of us were brainwashed by culture or just other influences as well, the education system. But I think people think, lawyer, doctor, banker, these are these like stereotypical paths that like require high performance in education. And if you play your cards right, you can, end up in a career where you can make several $100,000 a year, potentially even, a million or $2 a year. The funny thing about those careers is they do actually have kind of a ceiling, and the people that exceed those ceilings are the entrepreneurs in those spaces. So it's the people that start their own investment bank or start their own practice or start, have their own law firm. They're not just a partner at another firm or a senior person at another firm. And so there's a ton of guys out there that, own a couple franchises, a gas station and some real estate in a small town, not even a city. And they're probably making a couple $1,000,000 a year. And I think that path often goes overlooked. And honestly, the level of resistance to have success in that story might be lower than to assume you can become, a top lawyer, a top doctor, a top banker. And I think it often goes overlooked. And I think that there's probably an opportunity for people that consider themselves, fairly intelligent or fairly driven or thriving in competitive environments, or those industries might be a little bit less competitive than trying to become the next, senior managing director at Goldman Sachs, or becoming the next, partner at XYZ law firm, or the top surgeon at a reputable hospital. And so also they likely require less hours. Those other jobs are grueling. Managing, 3 McDonald's and 2 gas stations, and like, I don't know, owning a couple multi-unit apartments and, the suburbs of some town or off some highway exit. It's a little bit more intuitive. It doesn't require as much education or training. It's there, and it takes time to accumulate that. You got to do one thing at a time and add on to it every few years, but you can have the same success and arguably a much more comfortable and rewarding life. And so that's also what got me thinking, during COVID, I was like, am I happy? Because I came from finance and I said, do I want to stay on this trajectory? I'm satisfied at the competition, but I started realizing I wasn't satisfied at the day to day.
It's funny that you say that. Like, becoming a very wealthy lawyer or banker is a viable career path, but it may actually be harder than doing some forms of entrepreneurship that people would widely consider very successful, like Mr. Multi-gas station owner, for
Yeah.
example. I think one of the reasons that people don't go the so-called gas station route is that embedded in that path is a huge period of uncertainty that doesn't change the likelihood of success. You ultimately can be successful doing some like basic forms of entrepreneurship, but it often requires you to put in a lot of work without seeing significant results for like a fairly long time. And I think that goes against human nature and is really scary for a lot of people, including myself. I just like know that the payoff is worth it, so I'm doing it. But that's probably a reason that a lot of people don't do it.
I'd argue less Shell gas stations or any chain gas station you could think of close than analysts make it to managing director.
Yeah, 100%. And like the lifetime compensation of the guy who starts the Shell gas station, he runs over the analyst who makes it to VP or director.
It's funny because I think, again, we've just been brainwashed to assume that like these certain career paths are like higher probabilities of guaranteed success. And I think that they just have higher starting points, but pretty quickly after 5 or 10 years. And, life's a long process. Hopefully we're all going to live to be, 80 plus. We're all going to work for, 40, 50 plus years. The gas station owner, he catches up in the earlier innings. He catches up in like inning 3, and then he gets to destroy you for, till the ninth.
Yeah, with that careers, one is logarithmic and the other one is potentially exponential, or at least like benefits from some amount of compounding. I like to think that the pendulum is swinging in the other direction. What I mean by that is starting in like the early 2000s, probably, maybe the 90s, but probably the early 2000s around the first tech boom, entrepreneurship and startups started to get popular. And it's gone kind of one direction since then, right? Through the global financial crisis, private investing kind of exploded, more startups, more VC capital was raised, and it kind of went in one direction over the 2010s. Maybe it's just the universe that I'm in, but I like to think that people are starting to realize this big grand idea of starting the next disruptive startup is not a good trade. And that if you want to start your own business, do something like boring that will generate cash relatively soon.
we always hear about the winners and we never hear about the losers. And you only hear about the epic losers, the cases of fraud, the Theranoses or like the Sam Bankman-Frieds, the FTXs and stuff. But it's cool if you're the one winner, but like if you successfully raise VC money, you still are looking at a 90% plus failure rate. And what does that failure rate mean? If they give you some money to get a modest salary for 2 or 3 years, but your equity is going to go to zero and you would have been better off having a traditional career, or there's a much smaller failure rate in those boring basic businesses we talked about where they compound. McDonald's don't have a 90% fail rate. Franchises don't have a 90% fail rate. The reason they don't is because it's entrepreneurship for dummies. There's a large corporation that's doing the marketing for you. There's a large corporation that's buying you a Super Bowl ad. There's a large corporation that's telling you how to make the food, telling you how to train the employees. You just have to follow the roadmap they gave you. And there's definitely certain operators that are better than others. And those are the guys that end up owning 100 stores versus two or three over the course of, 30 or 40 years. But the success rate is much higher in a lot of these industries that people overlook. And it's true for the things that aren't chains as well, too, dry cleaners, laundromats, car washes, these basic service businesses that are around, oil changes, whatever it is. There are less, the story of I'm the next, Uber, I'm the next Snapchat, but there's plenty of stories of like I created $50 million worth of equity over my life. And that's a number that like is actually very big. And most people won't touch through other career paths.
But also very attainable if you're just patient. You're in finance, COVID hits, you have an existential crisis like we all did, and you're like, what do I want to do with my life? What's going to give me purpose? Am I happy? If Urban Smokehouse and the specter of ecom, using the internet, the leverage that comes along with it, if you didn't have that idea, stumble across that idea, work your way through the maze to that idea, what were some of your backup plans?
So I think I've also always said too, if Urban Smokehouse didn't work out, at least I already had a moderately successful financial services career with 8 or 9 years of experience that I could arguably go back to. I wouldn't be starting over. The other thing, and I've probably alluded to it here a couple times now, is I really think franchises are attractive across multiple verticals, whether it's restaurants, whether it's service businesses. As I described it kind of a couple minutes ago, I view franchises as entrepreneurship for dummies or entrepreneurship light because you have this natural support system of a large corporation that's highly incentivized for you to win as well. Like McDonald's doesn't want you to open a McDonald's and then it to fail 6 months later. They are doing everything in their power to make sure you win. They are going to help train your employees. They are going to tell you how to make the food. They are going to tell you what hours you are open. They are going to run national ad campaigns for you. And that's true for any of these large franchises, whether it's, a Jiffy Lube or, a Subway or a, XYZ service business. So I think that's another route that's often overlooked because there's a real ability too. And if you look at the payback periods in those industries, it's often you can pay for the store, pay for the business that you purchased or paid some startup fees for, kind of get a return on your money in 2.5 to like maximum 4 years. And then if you can start compounding that and become a multi-site owner, in year 10, you start really making a lot of money and you start really becoming kind of a force to be reckoned with because you then start having access to debt. The franchisor really starts believing in you and next thing you know, you've got 5, 10 stores. And it really starts scaling. It becomes a completely different game. I think that's any franchise business, as long as you believe that like the underlying product or the underlying industry isn't going away in the next 10 years, people are still going to want it, is something people should consider. I think it has a really high bar of success and a really low rate of failure because there's a lot of safety nets and a lot of very large companies that are supporting you.
10 years is the operative word there. A lot of people think 10 years is a long time, and it's not. That's another like common misconception in entrepreneurship. I need to get rich in like 3, 4 years. 3, 4 years is so long. Dude, 10 years isn't a long time. That's a shift in my thinking that I've made between like my late 20s and my early 30s, right? If you want to stack the deck in your favor, you just need to have like a super long time horizon. In 10 years to become a franchisee, 10 years to start really compounding and own multiple stores is really not that long. If you start when you're in your early 30s, you're in your early 40s and you have half your career left and you're already like 10 years into owning a bunch of stuff. And a lot of people I found speaking to people was too greedy and impatient. And that's sort of like an entry fee to being successful as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and I was blessed through my background, as I alluded to. Before Urban Smokehouse, I was in finance, and particularly I worked for a couple different family offices. And for those who are unfamiliar with that means, it's essentially someone that independently created a lot of wealth and hires a full team of people to help manage that wealth. And so these were often people that built businesses and sold them for hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. I noticed most of them weren't 28. Most of them weren't Evan Spiegel selling out of Snapchat. Most of them weren't Zuckerberg selling out of Facebook. They were like, I built a business over 40 years. And when I was 63 or even older, 70, I cashed out of this thing for several billion dollars, which is cool. But again, we get a little bit too glamorized by some of the recent like crazy blitz scaling tech successes. And those opportunities are out there, but people have to realize it's kind of like winning the lottery. They're one in a million. And I mean, if you have a great idea, don't get me wrong, go for it. But if your goal is to be wealthy and you're kind of industry agnostic and you want to find something that's fulfilling and you're confident you can compound in over time, I think that opportunity set opens up dramatically. As you said too, 10 years isn't that long, and hopefully a life that's going to be, all 80 years plus for us. Getting 5 to 10 years of work experience and then 10 years of entrepreneurship and kind of being pretty established and having an opportunity to frankly retire then or create generational wealth over another 20, 30, 40 years is a pretty awesome path if you ask me.
Let's switch gears and talk Urban Smokehouse. You ultimately find this idea and you decide to start it. Can you intimately walk me through the steps you took from, okay, I'm going to move forward with this, or at least start validating the idea, and I'm going to launch a Kickstarter campaign? Presumably, there was a multi-month period of diligence that you went through.
Yeah, it was about a 6 month period from going from call it idea to Kickstarter. So I woke up January 1st and I was like, what is my New Year's resolution this year? And I was like, now or never, Andrew. You've been thinking about this for a couple of months. Like, let's make the business plan. And I just sat at a desk in my bedroom and hammered out like an 18 to 20 page business plan, just typing 12, 14 hours, maybe a lunch break in between. Originally, I thought I was actually building a niche distribution business. So I was like, oh, let's get these like rare cuts or more difficult cuts of protein to buy and make them more accessible to like restaurants and retailers in the New York City market. Think like a Birico pork, like it's from Spain. Like you don't see a Birico pork in every grocery store, but like some restaurants will advertise it that way. And you're like, oh, cool, it's a special pork. I want that. Like, how do we create that more accessible? And same thing with Wagyu beef, Kobe beef. All these different proteins have, a couple different, call it prestigious categories that are harder to access. And so I wanted to build something there. And I realized that was actually a pretty low margin business and much more challenging to build. That was when I started thinking about maybe there's a big opportunity in direct to consumer. The things that pointed me there were just the packages piling up day over day in my lobby and every other lobby in the cities. Amazon's continued growth story, the adaption of like grocery delivery and some of these products that people didn't want to get delivered in the past, but now we're seeing, higher rates of purchasing delivery. And then also something that inspired me was, and I think finance brainwashes you into this as well too. They always tell you to like not create a business or not do a business where it's already a very large TAM, but very consolidated because they kind of brainwash you into thinking that you're going to be in a David versus Goliath situation. Well, how do you expect to compete with Kraft Heinz? How do you expect to compete with blah blah? Like they're too powerful, they're too big. And then I started realizing that's kind of BS. And in a lot of these large established businesses, what happens is the mega players completely give up on innovation and they just let other companies sprout up. And when they become an annoying size to them, which is 100 million, 500 million, a very sizable number to an individual, they just buy them. They acquire growth. They don't do growth themselves. And I started looking at companies like that were in food delivery in different categories, like Freshly, a meal delivery company that got acquired by Nestle for like 3.4 or 3.5 billion dollars, I want to say, after being in business for 4 or 5 years. I looked at a company like ButcherBox that was, when I was starting my business, a Kickstarter project that went from zero to $800 million in revenue in 8 years, raised zero money, was 100% bootstrapped. And it started like making me realize maybe this David versus Goliath thing, it's a threat, but don't view it as a reason to not look at the space. There's plenty of stories of people that in the space I was looking at, which was just delivering food on the internet, were creating businesses, getting big quickly, and selling them to large companies for very large numbers. And so that got me excited. And I was like, okay, like what can I do in this space? Like clearly there's an ability to disrupt. Clearly there's an ability to like make a product that someone's doing poorly or marketing poorly or not serving a certain niche and execute. And my background had a little bit of barbecue in it, and I looked around the internet and there was, good companies for delivering steaks and good companies for delivering lobsters and this and that, but there was really no one in barbecue. That was sizable. There were large companies that had some barbecue items like Omaha Steaks, or Honey Baked Ham, which are both, $500 million plus a year businesses, the barbecue on their menu was not the flagship product. It was an afterthought. So ultimately I was like, all right, cool. Maybe this barbecue thing can work. If we wanted to do this, how would we do it? That was probably in the March timeframe of the year that I was thinking about this. And so I started reaching out to some co-packers, contract manufacturers, and I also started reaching out to some distribution centers and cold storage facilities just to get a sense for like how much would this cost? What's the minimum scale in order to engage these people? What are kind of the limitations?
Pause. Quick question there, because I think people would find this helpful. You said I just reached out to some co-packers, some cold storage facilities. Like a lot of people, I think struggle to get started. Are we talking Google cold storage facility in Chicago, Illinois? Enter.
Yes, some people came from just straight Googling. Others came from me tapping my network. For example, there was someone that was pretty high up in marketing at Butcher Box that went to high school with one of my college roommates. And I knew of that and I was like, hey, can you introduce me to so and so? Like, I know he's at Butcher Box. Like, I want to talk to him and, learn about that. And then when I talked to him, I asked him, I said, so how do you got, like, I asked him about how they execute their business. You'll be surprised how much people are willing to share. Not everyone's close to the chest. I'm under NDA. I can't talk about that. Most people are loose-lipped. You can get them to tell you about things. And you just have to have a lot of conversations. And so it was funny because the fulfillment center that they started in, and they changed fulfillment centers a couple times, was ultimately the one I hired and started using. But I learned about them both from him and ultimately the co-packer I went with. And so once you just start talking to people in the ecosystem, you can also always ask them for referrals and stuff too. You can say like, well, why'd you choose that cold storage facility? What were the other ones you evaluated? Why didn't you like them? Just because they said no doesn't mean you should say no. Call them and then like ask the people that are the cold storage guys, like, who are the top co-packers that you guys work with or your clients work with? Who's moving the most product through here? Which ones have the lowest recall rates? And come up with questions that are going to help you evaluate other people in the ecosystem. And so like recall rates like would help you identify like a good person to make the product. The cold storage thing would be like, who has the least amount of returns? Who has the least amount of boxes where like when it shows up, they're like, it's thawed, like the ice melted. Just come up with little data points that are intuitively tell you if they're doing a good job. And then through just guerrilla networking, cold emailing, looking up websites, tapping your network, find a point or two of connectivity. And once you have that point or two of connectivity, you can really turn that one point into many points. It's frankly just be like resilient and persistent. You're not gonna like just go on the internet and be like, I found 10 cold storage companies today through Google and they all got back to me and we evaluated them within a week. No, you have to just talk to literally everyone. And you should ask also like your closest friends and family. Like you don't know who people know. Like you should call up, Ed Michelson and be like, hey man, I'm thinking about starting a food business. Do you know anyone in the industry? Like ask that, like just a super broad question and you'll start finding rocks to flip over and see what's underneath.
Could you just define what is co-packing and cold storage?
Yeah, so co-packing or contract manufacturing is when you like pay someone else to essentially make a product for you and make your brand for you. So like a co-packer or a contract manufacturer might make Urban Smokehouse one day and then on Tuesday make a different brand and on Thursday and Friday make brands for other people. That's also how you like de-risk the business as well, because when you're thinking about starting this business, you probably don't want to go spend millions of dollars building your own factory. You probably don't want to spend, a ton of money building a big payroll and having, 8 different factory workers to do different functions for you. And so one of the key things that when I was building this business, I did is I said, I want everything to be a variable cost. And as I get bigger, I'll bring certain functions in house if I think it makes sense. But in the beginning, I want everything to just be variable so that it's like it's scalable and it de-risks like the amount of capital I have to put at risk. Cold storage is just a guy that has a large refrigerator because after we make the product, it needs to be frozen so it doesn't go bad. Let's say we make 1,000 units at a time. It's going to take some time to divvy those up and send them to a bunch of different people. And so the guy who makes it ultimately packs it in what's referred to as a pallet. And then you send it to someone else that stores it and ultimately divides it up into the individual orders. And so that's the cold storage guy and also the fulfillment center, the pick and packer.
You went through this process of like just trying to familiarize yourself with like the back end of the industry. It sounds like there's no
Yeah,
like
no,
demand validation that's in like the Kickstarter campaign and everything. Your first step from I want to get into this space and like I have a barbecue background was to familiarize yourself with the back end.
if I were to do this, how do you do it? And if I were to do this, how much money does it cost? Meet a bunch of people in the space, find people that are capable, find people that are reasonably priced, and then understand like if I were to do this, because that gave me a bunch of different threshold answers. It was like, So if I were to make this, what would I have to what would I have to charge? Is the price egregious? Do I even think that there's a market for it at that price? Or like, can I deliver a reasonable product at a reasonable price? If I were to make this, do I need to sell 1 million units a day? That I probably can't bootstrap and I would need to raise like big money. Or is there a way to experiment with this and only sell, 10 units a day or 50 units a day or 100 units a day? And so understanding those minimum points of viability were important before I even wanted to see if a customer wanted it. Because if a customer wanted it, but I needed 1 million of them rather than just 100 of them, I might not have even started the project because that's a bigger endeavor.
So you're basically setting up the back end and doing like business diligence at the same time. Then do you actually put contracts in place with some people before you start thinking about demand validation in the Kickstarter?
No, so then what I did, I said, okay, I have a good sense for these numbers. I didn't get like formal contracts, but I said, nobody wants to work with startups. Startups are a risk. They're people that are small, annoying, and are underfunded. So probably are gonna pay their tiny bills very late or go bankrupt and not pay their bill at all. And so what I did is I said, okay, cool. Like I think I understand the operating model. Let's go do a Kickstarter. I hired like a videographer. All the startup cost was like hiring a videographer to make a video, hiring someone on Fiverr to make me a cool logo, and me spending, 2 or 3 days perfecting like the story and the pitch that I wanted to tell in the video. So call it all in. It was a lot of time and maybe like 2 or 3 thousand bucks. I then went out and did the Kickstarter, which was successful, and we can get into how I made it successful. But we raised, 35 or a little over $30,000. I then went back to the contract manufacturer and the cold storage facility saying, hey, I have $30,000 in the bank. I've got, X amount of people that want orders delivered or orders made and delivered. Would you like to help execute that? And then everyone takes you more seriously because they say, oh, cool. Like when you make this, it's actually going to be sold. So everyone's going to get paid here on time. And like you already created a little bit of demand. So like you might order again or like, continue doing this. It's not a one-time project.
But you knew that these contract manufacturers could fulfill before you started the Kickstarter. So step one was
Yes.
business diligence, finding like, is there a person who can do what I want?
Yeah.
Yes. Do the economics make sense? Yes. Next question, is there demand? Yes. We're in business.
Exactly. And that also then gave me the leverage too, where in case they then were trying to rip me off, I could say like, oh, well, these other contract manufacturers want my $30,000 or these other cold storage companies want my $30,000. I no longer was like the guy with the idea on the napkin. I was the guy with customers and money in hand. And I was asking like, who wanted to execute it with me?
Maybe we just briefly talk about the Kickstarter. I know you've talked about it a lot on other podcasts. Do you just want to quickly walk me through how you generated 30,000 bucks?
Yeah, there's like 2 or 3 things that everyone needs to know about crowdfunding.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Also, if you know any entrepreneurs who went through a period of real struggle or failure before becoming successful, let me know in the comments. I'd love to interview them. The more stories we can tell on this channel, the more entrepreneurs will be inspired to keep going when it gets dark and achieve the freedom we all want in life. All right, back to the video.
So whether it's Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or one of those other websites, your goal is to attract people other than just your friends and family. How you do that is you want to be a project that is like featured on the website. So it's like on the homepage, it's like one of the trending projects or like the hot projects. And there's like the homepage, and then there's also like the pages within each category. So if you click on like the food and beverage category, you want to be like the top performing food and bev, project right now. Similar to how I found the people that were ultimately in the ecosystem, I reached out to people that had successful Kickstarters in food and beverage before, and I asked them like how they did it. Pretty much everyone told me you need to set a goal that you're confident you can hit within 24 hours. Even though it's a 30-day campaign, you need to hit your goal within 24 hours because if you blow it out of the water that quickly, that's how you kind of beat the algorithm and become like a featured project.
Dude, just briefly, I'm on the Kickstarter website and there's a featured project and 4 recommended for use. That one of them has 2 days left. The others all have like 20 plus days left, and all of them are between 300 and 1000% funded.
And that's the algo. So once I knew the algo, I was like, okay, how do we do this? And so then I like was just extremely annoying for a month and just made, a Facebook status, an Instagram post. I called, emailed, texted all these people and just said, hey, I'm doing this. It's okay if you don't want to support me. Do you know anyone that likes barbecue? Can you introduce me to someone that maybe would support me? Can you make a Facebook post about it? Can you talk about it? Try to get other people to become advocates for the project and then collect their contact information. And so then like a week before the campaign was launching, I emailed everyone like the campaign is launching in a week. And it's just very important if you're going to support me in the first 24 hours. And you just send those ultra annoying reminders, a week out, 2 days out, day of, an hour before, an hour in, 2 hours in, 4 hours in, and you just really spam hard to make sure that you hit that goal. And then after you hit the goal, you let the algo play out for you because hopefully randos are supporting you at that point.
Presumably you were reaching out to people you felt comfortable with, relatively comfortable with in your network or friends or family. Was anyone A, not taking you seriously, and or B, said like, leave me the fuck alone?
Ton of people, but this is the one moment in your life you're supposed to be extremely annoying and not give a shit and go all in.
We talked about earlier with Mr. Gas Station Owner and how you have to operate for a long time without any result. That's like one barrier that's like a huge non-starter for people starting their own companies. Another one is like going around to contract manufacturers and like having a ton of resilience and being thoughtful about how to get information. That's another barrier. This is like another barrier. You have to be annoying to your friends. You have to like put yourself out there and risk your friends not taking you seriously. That's another barrier. All of which are like you can just execute around those barriers, but they're huge reasons people don't even start.
They're mental barriers because like you then like feel bad about yourself at the end of the day that like you pissed off 8 of your friends or like, your uncle told you to like fuck off. It's hard to like go to bed with a smile on your face. Like you definitely have like a little bit of like guilt, but then you just have to remember like we'll see what they're saying in a decade. We'll see what they're saying in 5 years. And even if you do fail, there's so much like learning and just going through these processes. It's worth doing.
How much of the 30 grand ended up not being friends and family? And the reason I ask is because I know I'm not representative of the field, but I'm not just like going on Kickstarter every day, like looking what projects I can fund. Just now, checking Kickstarter and preparing for this interview was the first time I visited the website probably in years.
So there's like, and actually I forgot about this and I haven't talked about it in a while, so I'd have to relook up their names. But then also when you start becoming trending, there's like communities of people that like are obsessed with crowdfunding. So if you like you hit your like goal like within like 20 hours or something, then you'll get these like niche blogs and essentially like free PR to like pick you up. And they'll hit their email list being like, yo, check out this new hot product. And people will be like, whoa, we've been waiting for this. And they'll back it. And so like you can find these guys that have backed like 100 different Kickstarters or like 50 different Kickstarters, and like they're passionate about it. As it gets a little bit bigger, you want to kind of have those press people you're ready to hit. And so what I did is I looked up like the most successful food and beverage guys, and in addition to reaching out to their founders, I had the list of everyone that wrote about those projects as the campaign was going. And so then I would email those reporters or I'd email those bloggers or I'd email those people being like, hey, I noticed that you wrote about ButcherBox 5 years ago because they did this, this, and that. Well, I wanted to let you know, like, I also just beat my goal in 20 hours for a 30-day campaign. If you're interested in continuing to write in the space, maybe this could be a new story. Want to chat tomorrow at noon? And I'd just bait PR people to write about me. And again, this is a tactic where like, you get 1 out of 10 responses. Most people completely ignore you. You have to email them back 9 times, reply them back 9 times. They might tell you to stop emailing them, but you have to be persistent. You have to be persistent. You have to be shameless. There's no shame. You just have to own it and realize that it'll be worth it when it hits. And it's a game of numbers. You can't try once. You have to take a lot at bats. Like that's the other thing. This is one company. Cool. This is my first at bat with a business. But in all these steps, I didn't say like, let me find a cold storage facility and I talked to one. Every step of the way, like you have to talk to tens, if not hundreds, and find the one that's right for you and realize that like many people are going to ignore you. Many people are going to say it's silly. But if you're persistent, it's a big world out there. You can find some believers. And most markets are competitive. There's not just one guy that can do it for you. There's hundreds.
So they invested, and this was in exchange for product, not equity, correct?
Yeah, no equity. That's like the beauty of crowdfunding. It's basically all like IOUs. Most people bought, the food that we ultimately sold, like ribs, but we had a couple other items too. We had like a t-shirt with our logo on it. We had like a big cookout thing, or we'd like come to you and cook if you spent a crazy amount of money. But it was all food related. And like the entry level item was the t-shirt, and then it was just like more and more food, subscription packages, and then cookouts.
Let's transition from now you got all this 30K in the bank and you've got the contract manufacturers lined up. So you fulfill your first orders. Then I imagine there's some like period of radio silence, a sort of now what do I do feeling.
That's 100% accurate. You're like,
So
awesome. We like made all this money, and then like the next week you make $0 or like $500,
you're
and you're
just like,
like, crap, where do we go from here?
obviously you ultimately figured it out. So what was the next step? What were the next like specific actions you took?
One of the challenging things with like an internet business versus an in-person business, again, persistence is a common theme, I'm going to say, in all these categories, is in an in-person sale, I can't force you to buy the product, but I get to be the one pitching. I get to get in your face. As you walk away, I can interject and say another sentence. I could chase you down the street. A website, an Instagram ad, a Facebook ad, you can't be persistent like that. People can exit out. And so my strategy in the beginning was just to do pop-ups. And so I did a lot of pop-ups in New York, and in specific, I approached bars that didn't serve food. And I'd say, hey, like, you guys don't have food. I'm sure most people after 2 or 3 hours get hungry and leave and go buy, pizza or something. Can I set up a grill outside on the corner and cook ribs? And it'll be only accretive for you because everything I'm selling doesn't compete with your existing business. And theoretically, it'll cause people to stay here longer. I didn't meet a single person that said no to that pitch. So I met a couple bars and I started, cooking on football Sundays or, different events like that. And then I also found a couple like one-off events in my area. So I found like a military base that had something called like Family Day, where you bring your children or, your spouse or your parents to the base and kind of tour around. And I cooked at that. So the pop-up allowed me to kind of automatically make money or force people to buy the product, but in a non-scalable manner. It's me behind a grill. I can't triple, quadruple, 5x that. It's limited by my ability to cook at a certain rate. So I was collecting emails, slowly converting people to the website, but I was also slowly getting like more reviews, slowly building a name. And then I had enough, I was making money off of that to then spend on digital ads every week.
So my first question is, you were selling stuff or were you giving away free samples like Costco and then saying like, if you want like a full rack of ribs, you have to pay me X dollars?
The model tweaked every week. And again, trust me, I was scrappy. It started with a folding table, a Weber travel girl that you could buy at like Walmart, and posters that were made with markers and posters you could buy at Office Depot for $3.99. And then after like 3 weeks, I ordered, like a cool $1,000 like big banner that was, professionally made. And then after like a couple more weeks, I'd buy like a tent that went over it. And like in the beginning, I only sold. Then I started adding the like, you can have free samples, but you get like, a piece of one, and I'm trying to sell you, six. Then I started bringing t-shirts to the pop-ups. Then I started bringing, to-go kits. If you wanted to like have one and you enjoyed it, I'd be like, how about you buy, four that are in the packaging and bring them home and cook them on Wednesday for your family. The pop-up kind of grew a little bit. It had an
Sure.
evolution to it. In the beginning, like the big question was like, how do I process credit cards? And so I had to get like one of those little like QR scanners, and like obviously we had a preference for cash, and it was the big ecos. And like some people would be like, can we just Venmo you? And I'm like, sure, because you just need to get the name out there.
On your first pop-up or your first couple, what was your like gross revenue per day?
Like $500. It probably took like 6 to 8 weeks to break like 1,000.
When people are buying from you, are you like in their face kind of and saying, hey, I'm starting this new business. Let me know what you think of the product. Check out our website, leave a review, bup.
Yeah, so like when you go to a baseball game and like the hot dog guy walks down the aisle and he's like, "Get your hot dog, get your hot dog."
Yeah.
That was me on street corners. Who wants ribs? And I was yelling, and people would actually like that weren't even part of the bar that were just walking by. I was like a lemonade stand. People that would walk by would just buy ribs and keep walking. But we had the
Nice.
restaurants to fall back on because that was the thing at the bar. So I wasn't independent. I was part of the bar for that day. If I were to set up in a random street corner and I wasn't affiliated with a bar, it would be a legal issue. But since I had a loose affiliation with the places and the businesses I was doing the pop-ups with, I could say like, I'm part of Donnybrook. I'm part of, Blue Haven. I'm part of XYZ bar that I was doing the pop-ups at, and they have food and liquor licenses and all that jazz. So
And what about the meat that you were cooking? Did you pre-order a bunch of stuff from your contract manufacturer and just forecast how much you would sell?
I would just buy like double what I thought I would need. I would try to sell it all, but eventually, 8 hours would pass. The sun would set. It'd start getting cold. The bar would start drying out, and you'd be like, "Oh, okay, I guess that's all we could get today." And you drive home, and then you re-up. I wasn't ordering it from the manufacturer because I had them at the fulfillment center, but there just wasn't a lot of traffic to the website, and so I was the biggest orderer from the website. I mean, obviously I had a code to make it free for myself, but I would have my fulfillment center mail me 30, 40, 50 units a week. I was moving the weight then in person, and then there'd be very light traffic to the website itself.
So pre your first dollar of digital advertising, when you're going through this whole pop-up scrappy phase, are you burning cash?
The business was making money, but you have to remember, I had to pay for my life. The business itself actually made money in the pop-up stage, and then it lost money when we started advertising for the first 8 months. But you needed to learn how to sell online in order to scale beyond being a lemonade stand.
Another thing I wanted to dig into is you do this pop-up thing, and in my experience, when I discover a new product, I'm almost never an early adopter, right? Because early adopters are a small percentage of people who discover new things. When I go to these websites, I'm like, how the hell do they get all these reviews? 5-star reviews out the wazoo, right? And at some point they started with 0 reviews, and then it went to 1 review, and then 10, and then 200. How did you start getting your first reviews?
We definitely had the people in person write reviews, and we had a QR code for them to like write reviews on the website and the products that they were eating. In person, you can kind of put like a gun to their head a little bit and be like, "Hey man, did you like them? Were they good? Hey man, we just started this a month ago. Can you please write a review online? Here's the QR code. Like, can you please do it?" And like, it's a lot more persuasive than like the email that you just delete the second you open it, you know? The Kickstarter people as well, we kind of describe them as our founding customers. We really leaned on them for a lot of different things in the beginning. And so post the Kickstarter process, we basically told all of them, like, we asked them for feedback and like we had to tweak things about the packaging and stuff like that. And we essentially all asked them like for reviews on the website. We asked them to write reviews on third-party sites as well, like Google reviews. We asked them to, tell their friends, give products away, stuff like that. And so we leaned on that initial customer base that we had like a little bit more of a personal connection and tie to. So whether we knew them in person or they supported the Kickstarter, and that was the beginning of the snowball effect. And similar to the Kickstarter, it's kind of like getting enough of your core to then attract randoms. You can only kind of lean on that core for so long. In year 3, you can't just be selling to your friends. You got to be selling to, 95% people you've never heard of or don't know and are attracting via ads. But a lot of that's the product of the snowball effect of really leaning hard on a network that you built in the beginning that you can kind of ask for a little bit more out of at a higher rate to help create that snowball effect.
During this whole pop-up period, how was your mental state?
It was very volatile and it was really based on the day-to-day successes. So like if the website randomly had like somehow had like $2,000 in sales, I'd be like pumped and I'm like, yes, like the website's starting to work. If I go to the pop-up and it'd like be like a dud after it was like good for a couple weeks, I'd be like, oh no, like should I keep doing this? Is this viable? It was really my emotional state was it went up and down based on daily sales, to be honest. I kind of just kept telling myself like I know this can work, but I just have to hit that spark. I had to find what that fulcrum that's going to help take it. And I mean, I did beat myself up, and many people told me to like get a side job, quit, do something else, pivot into this or that. But you got to believe in yourself more than anyone. Like this isn't something where you're going to have like a strong support network. Unfortunately, you're kind of going to have actually a strong negativity network, in my opinion. You're gonna yeah, you're gonna have a lot of people that are constantly telling you to pivot, try to give you advice that like is obvious and you've heard 100 times, and there's a reason you're not doing it, likely because it costs money and you're a bootstrap startup and have no money. You just have to, as I call it, MIH, make it happen. Which is why I like the in-person stuff, which is why I like some of those things I described in the beginning, because you have more control. You have more of an ability to like be that annoying bulldog and really ask and really push and really force and be aggressive. Because once you're online, you really lose that ability. But you need that to like just gain all those snowball effects in terms of like positive reviews, other people talking about it socially. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to turn your customers into your biggest advocates. The Facebook ad isn't really what converts. It might bring people to the site. It might give them an initial glimpse, but what really wins for you is if Edward Michelson tweets, "Just had the best ribs in my life," and then 5 of his 1,000 Twitter followers are like, what's Ed talking about? Because they know him, they trust him. They're going to listen to Ed talk more than me posting an ad online. So it's just about creating more and more advocates for the business. And how you do that is challenging and probably different for every product, but the more super fans you can have, the more successful you're going to be.
Let's transition to digital marketing. You now got like a little bit of a bankroll and you're like, okay, I need to step into this money losing game of paid ads and effectively pay to play. Everyone knows, anyone who does like one Google search on how to do paid ads, like the first blog post is going to tell you that you're going to lose money before you make money. What was your time horizon like for how long you're willing to put up with learning how to run paid ads with no results?
As long as I could keep lights over my head, man. It was just like, we're going to figure this out. So in the beginning, you just lose money no matter what. The cost to acquire customers more than like the cost you're selling the product for. And you're like, this just will never work. But then you start getting like different data where you're like, okay, cool. Like an above normal percentage of people are like going to the website, but they're not checking out. There's different conversion points. Like one's like clicking the ad and going to the website. On the website, like adding the product to the cart. Once it's added to the cart, typing their credit card information and hitting complete order. And so there's different things you can do to tweak those different exchange points. So one would be like, okay, the ad sucks. No one's going to the website. On the website, the value prop isn't being explained properly or the price is bad. Why aren't people adding it to the cart? If you look online, there'll be like a couple ad adagers or solutions solutions for solving those different conversion rates. You just start playing a kind of an A/B testing game, tweaking my pricing, tweaking my value prop. Are people more attracted to like video ads versus still image ads? Are people more interested in like hearing about the taste and the quality, or do they want to be led with like the convenience of the product? What resonates with the customer? You're going to learn a lot. I originally thought this product was going to resonate with young professionals in cities. That's why we named it Urban Smokehouse. We're bringing the smokehouse to the city. We learned over the course of 8 months that old people in retirement states like the product, which is kind of the opposite of what I originally even named the company after. And so, most of our customers are Arizona, New Mexico, Georgia, Florida, 60 plus male. You kind of just have to put yourself out there, and then every 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe even every few days, tweak things, and you'll notice like, oh sweet, like my customer acquisition cost is improving, or like, oh sweet, like this conversion rate's improving. You iterate on that, and you constantly iterate on that. And for us, it took basically about 8 months to bring the ads from losing money to making money, and it can often take longer, and it can also be shorter. But you have to just put yourself out there, get some data, and then start tweaking one or two aspects of it to remedy the situation until you end up in a situation where you can make money off the ads.
How did you go from no ads to ad number one?
Even if you're just not a business, a normal person, you've probably noticed when you post on Instagram, you can hit a button that's like promote post. And you can like, set a budget, and it'll tell you like an estimate of how many people will see the post. So I just started experimenting in like super small budgets, like promoting posts for like a couple $100 and seeing what happened. And then after a couple weeks of realizing it was going nowhere, I started talking to agencies. Eventually found an agency that was very reasonable and willing to like take a risk on the startup as well. I honestly just learned a lot with them. And, we got in a Slack channel, and every day, we'd be talking about how the ads are doing and suggesting how we can improve them. And as a collaborative effort over 8 months, figured it out. And in addition to all those things I mentioned too, there's like a million other parts of the A/B testing I didn't mention. It's like, or in the beginning, you probably want to try like Google, TikTok, Meta, like every platform. And then you're going to realize like, oh, I'm hitting at way better rates on this platform versus the others. Like maybe we should just learn that one before doing the other ones, because the goal here is just to get to profitability. We'll learn everything eventually, but we need to make money. And there's other layers of that iteration as well too. As I mentioned, it's like changing the pricing of the product, changing the packages. Like originally we had a 2-pack. Now we don't have a 2-pack. The smallest pack's a 4-pack. Occasionally we get complaints like, I don't want 4, I want 2. Well, the customer acquisition cost that we ultimately settled on doesn't justify the 2-pack, so I need to sell you at least 4.
When I saw your initial ads, I thought two things. I thought, wow, it's really impressive that you have this going and you're putting yourself out there. But I also thought, just being candid with you, that the ads didn't look that high quality. It was kind of DIY. It was you on a roof saying, I'll get you ribs in 15 minutes, and some like cool B-roll of the ribs themselves being cooked. And that was it. Did those ads convert?
So in the beginning, I thought I needed high quality, like I had for the Kickstarter video. But then the problem was I realized when you start running ads, there's a ton of ad fatigue, and like ads don't work for months. They work for like days, maybe a week or two at best. And so you really need to have like just a straight up factory making constant different versions of the ads or constant different value props and stuff. That's why in the beginning, frankly, from like a cost perspective, we just leaned heavily on UGC, like user generated content, and like me filming on a roof, or me doing a bunch of one-liners, and like they did work. It's like a stepping stone. So it's like you do that, and then as you get a little bit bigger, like we can upgrade the quality, and the TAM will increase, or people will be more attracted. But we just had to make it work with scrappy resources.
Right.
That's what being scrappy is like in the beginning.
What was it like to put yourself out there and put your face on your company and to show a little bit of your vulnerability and your personality? Like, what was that like?
I actually loved it like the first time or two we did the filming. So like the marketing agency I ended up starting working with, they'd come over once a month, and we'd like just film for 3 or 4 hours. And then once like it got to the third or fourth film session, I was like, okay, this is exhausting. It's one of those things where it's fun in the beginning, but it gets old pretty fast.
Let's talk about that 8 month period where you weren't making any money on ads. 8 months in retrospect doesn't sound like that much time, but when you're in month 3, it sounds like a really fucking long time. It just sounds really, really hard. What was it like?
I say 8 months because it took 8 months to call it like consistently find success. But during that 8 month period, there'd be like a week where it'd be like, oh my God, like we figured it out, it's working. And then like it wouldn't work again for 3 weeks. There were these pockets of hope that you would like live for, and you'd be like, you'd think you made it. And then like 5 days later, you'd realize that like you're back at square one and you're questioning everything. And so it was those moments of hope that like kind of kept me going. There were plenty of times like I'll be completely honest that I would have a very hard time falling asleep at night. And my number one thought would be, is this going to work? Should I be applying for jobs? I just really wanted to stick with it. And I kept telling myself, like, I know it can, but it's the pressures of the people around you that that start eating away at you because, my parents were getting worried. Like my girlfriend at the time was getting worried. Like people are kind of encouraging you to always take the safe route. And it's in those outer months where it starts to feel like really risky to people. And if you don't find a way to recognize that you're making progress, you're going to start beating yourself up. And so I think what kept me going was just like finding little glimmers of hope and reminding myself, like, well, a year ago, this was an idea on a napkin. 6 months ago, like, we never delivered a product. Now we deliver product. 3 months ago, like, we didn't have a pop up. 2 months ago, we weren't advertising online. And so I would always remind myself of like the milestones we were making. Although they didn't relate to profitability, there were clear indications that like the business was growing up and I was growing up. I don't know. I needed to graduate high school. I needed to get through college. I needed to just make it to the next step. But we were making steps happen. We weren't regressing. We were progressing. It just wasn't turning into dollars.
It's funny that you said that it starts to feel really risky to people in the outer months because those outer months are often the only months that matter. Those are the months when you need to like really lean in to like punch out on the other side. And that's also the months that you feel the most pressure from yourself and from your network that like maybe this night might not be working out.
And like on those outer months, just so like people understand too, like I went all in on this thing. Like I had liquidated my 401k. I was maxing out credit cards. I was having the Facebook ads like turned on and off at times because the Facebook payment would get denied, and so the ads would automatically turn off. And the next day, like finally, like I don't know, some transfer, some settlement would happen where we'd make money, and then the ad would turn back on. But we were grinding. We were just like, we are gonna make this work.
How much money did you invest in the business, not including like not net of the $30,000 Kickstarter and the first inventory run? So the $30,000 inventory Kickstarter funded the first inventory run. Cool, that's done. Now you had to fund all these pop-ups. You had to build a website, pay cold storage fees. You had to run all these ads. Like how much did you put into, if you're comfortable sharing, how much did you put into the business?
Most of the cost, a good chunk of the cost isn't even putting into the business. It's just like, how do you pay to live with no income for like your own life? You have your own rent, you have your own like food to put on the table and stuff like that. And so I include that in like startup costs. So it's not necessarily going onto the Urban Smokehouse balance sheet. I put in probably 150 to $180,000. A combination of just like liquidating 401ks and like Roth IRAs and stuff like that, in addition to a modest amount of savings, and then just living. It's not paycheck to paycheck, but like profit to profit or whatever you want to call it, just off the business, but in a super scrappy way for a long time.
I've never liquidated my 401k to fund any of my entrepreneurial ventures. My last business, I funded out of pocket. It had like a pretty big impact on my mental health. My emotional swings were like crazy. I like got depressed sometimes. I don't know how I would handle doing what you did.
Oh, dude, like it was pretty brutal the first year. But the main times I noticed it was just not being able to sleep because it'd be like, midnight and you're like, all right, go to bed. And then it's like 3 or 4 in the morning and you're like, your mind's still racing about it. I don't know. I kept telling myself like, this is the real deal. Are you gonna go all in? Like, do you want to own the whole thing or do you want to own 30% and raise a bunch of VC money? And that's a de-risking. That's a comfort level for a couple of years. But if you're playing for the year 20 liquidity event or the year 10 liquidity event, the equity you give up now is worth a multiple of burning 100 grand from a savings account. I was relatively young. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have a kid. I didn't have a wife that didn't work. Like I didn't have dependents. So I wasn't putting other people's lives or livelihood at risk. It was just mine. I think this is like a much more challenging thing to do if you're a little bit further along in your life and you have some of those other burdens, but also amazing aspects to life because it just creates a whole nother level of pressure and like obligation to provide.
Let's transition to the end of that 8 month period. So 8 month, 1 year period, whatever. It starts to work. So your customer acquisition costs are high, but they're low enough that you're profitable. Between then and now, was it sort of like a somewhat linear journey of like, we figured it out. I have like a basic business execution formula that I can just put my head down and grind on? Or were there other like kind of big hurdles that you had to navigate to get to what I think is 300 grand a month in sales now?
The first 8 months, a lot of that is like, it's just tweaking the business model. It's like, you build that operating model before you launch, but you don't realize like how much it actually costs to acquire a customer or like what the average order value is going to be because you have options on your website. Are people always going to buy the cheapest thing or like, are people going to buy the most expensive thing? Is the margin different on those products? What's the lifetime value of your customer? Are you willing to acquire a customer at like a loss because you're confident they're going to buy the product again, over the course of their life? There's a lot of these different things that go into the calculus. Over those 8 months, we got a lot more comfortable with those metrics, or we tweaked them into places where we then became comfortable with them. And so the first 8 months, it was like you experiment with online advertising, and then it got to call it between like 25 and 30 grand a month. And then it was like, okay, don't spend $1 more, make it more profitable. Like just make 30 grand a month, but like increase the average order value, increase the return on ad spend. Just make 30 grand a month, but like improve all these metrics. And then when it got to a place where we were comfortable, it was like, okay, your goal every day is to spend more money than you did yesterday and to maintain or improve these metrics. And that was when the business then went from like 30K to like 35 to 45 to 60 to 115 to 250. Then it started
On the
growing.
same ad spend per month, roughly?
No, no, no. The goal was to maintain the metrics. And so that's how we approached it. And so that was really like that first, 8 to 12 month period. It was staying in roughly the same revenue bracket, but tweaking things to make it profitable, tweaking things to improve the average order value, tweaking things to, improve return on ad spend or decrease customer acquisition costs, all these other things. And then once it found its place that made sense, then the goal was ramp it up, scale it.
What have been the biggest levers for value in driving up your return on ad dollars?
The biggest lever, which isn't a return on ad dollar, was average order value. If I can just put more stuff in the box, my margin goes up dramatically because the biggest cost is like the shipping and the ice and just it's costs a lot to ship something that's heavy at an expedited rate. Remember, we removed the 2 pack. Now the minimum order is the 4 pack. I increased the price on the 4 pack. I made the prices on the 6 and the 8 and the 10 and the 12 better. And we just, over the course of 8 months, I increased my average order value from like $108 to about 160. And so increasing your average order value that much dramatically changes the calculus because then your customer acquisition cost can go up while your return on ad spend improves as well.
Due to like the nature of your product being perishable and having to be frozen, it requires more ice the further it goes. Your unit economics are different depending on where you're shipping it to within the United States. Is that right?
Yeah, and it also changes if like I can ship it to you via ground shipping or I have to upgrade it to 2-day air. Just proximity of traveling. So yeah, the biggest margin expansion opportunity for us is adding additional distribution centers so that we can reach everyone in 2 days or less via ground shipping and never have to upgrade to 2-day air.
What is entailed in making that happen? More capital, or do you just have to go through the same process you went through again where you got the first distribution center?
It's a bit of an operational overhaul because it's easy when you just send all of your orders to one distribution center. It has to become a little bit systematized of like these states and these zip codes orders get sent to this center versus that center versus, this one. Oh, if this center is sold out, the backup orders can get filled from this. So you just need to create a very large and complicated decision-making tree for which centers fill which orders. And then it gets a little bit more complicated when you go from tracking, company level inventory to company level inventory and then also site level inventory. And then in addition as well, you want to have certain levels of volume at each center. Because you don't want to have like, one center that like if you send them a pallet or two and it takes them 6 months to sell it, it's a perishable good. You want people to be moving the product relatively quickly. It's an element of one scale. So a year ago, the scale wasn't there to add multiple distribution centers. We weren't moving the volume that justified it. We are now at the point where the volume makes sense to add a center or two. And we're just going through that process of operationally, how do we do this? And how do we make it like the lightest lift to convert to a multi-center model? And then the final thing I was going to mention too is like, unfortunately, I also call it the Rosetta Stone, but every distribution center likes to receive the orders in like a different format. So call it, I send you an Excel file with, first name in column A, last name in column B, address in C, and then like the other distribution center wants it, transposed. The other distribution center wants it in different orders. And so, and again, these things are all possible, but it's just like, it's a bit of a pain in the ass. I want to add 2 layers that we skipped over that are also accretive. There are multiple marketplaces. So I was on Shopify actually I was on something else called Equid for like 6 months. Then I migrated to Shopify. Now I'm on Shopify and Amazon. Theoretically, I can get on like Walmart.com, Target.com. They have similar programs to Amazon where you can fulfill it yourself and be on their marketplaces. The other option is menu expansion. So when we started, we just sold ribs. Then we added beef brisket. Then we added chicken. Theoretically, both can increase average order value. So you're buying more items from us at the same time. And they increase TAM. So, oh, your daughter doesn't eat beef. Oh, your wife doesn't eat pork. But, now we have a menu that, caters to more people. And so those will be things that are also going to be constantly drivers of growth, menu expansion and channel expansion. And then not to go crazy on you, that's just for D2C. There's wholesaling as well. So hopefully it'll be in retail here as well soon.
On one other podcast, I heard you talk about a couple interesting digital marketing points, which I wanted to dig into. So the Butcher Box story, Kickstarter to 800 million in revenue in 8 years with no outside capital. Insane story, right? The founder, I believe his name is Mike Salguero.
Yeah.
Apparently he attributed a lot of his success to like early marketing arbitrage that doesn't really exist anymore. Influencer marketing was very cheap and he was able to get customers really, really cheaply, largely due to timing and execution. Another example of that is Alex Hormozy with Gym Launch. So for people who don't know who he is, he's this business and entrepreneur influencer. And his first company was this like gym launch service that helped people start gyms. He like comes out and says, the reason we were successful is because 10 years ago, Facebook ads were wildly underpriced. Another function of like, okay, yeah, you had a good idea, ButcherBox and Gym Launch, but success was predicated on timing and execution. At risk of drawing attention to some well-kept secret that I'm unaware of, that maybe you are there any points of leverage in the e-commerce space or business in general that you're taking advantage of right now that are likely to disappear in a few years' time?
Yes, I think that's the definition of digital marketing. What worked 3 years ago doesn't work anymore, and you need to be constantly adapting. So there's an analytics company I use called Triple Whale. I believe they see 1/3 of total revenue that goes through Shopify. I went to their conference 2 months ago. Their average customer has a return on ad spend on Meta and like Google that's relatively similar, slightly north of 3. And then their average customer on like TikTok has like a return on ad spend of like 8. But that's because TikTok's trying to incentivize people to use TikTok Shop. That's because TikTok is a newer and growing platform. In a couple of years, there'll be another social media platform that displaces it. We saw Meta try to come out with Threads to compete with Twitter, but there's always a new platform. And new platforms usually need to have a very disruptive pricing structure to get companies to stop using the tools that they are using that are working great and spend a lot of money on them. And so I think that digital marketing in general is disrupted every 2 to 3 years. And you have to constantly be willing to learn the new platforms, try the new thing. CPM, which is like essentially the cost to get a certain amount of views, always goes up on every platform. It's not like Facebook gets cheaper over time, it gets more expensive. YouTube, all these platforms. And so you need to constantly be exploring the new platforms and finding the ones that have arbitrage in them. And maybe it's not the platforms, maybe it can be how you use the platforms. As you alluded to, influencers. Influencers were cheap 10 years ago. Now they're expensive. Now they know what they're worth. It's hard for me to tell you what's going to be next, but what I do tell you is that the dinosaurs get killed, and the people that are constantly trying the new tools and willing to attempt to master them are the ones that are going to have that value creation. And that's what the Butcher Box guy talks about in terms of marketing arbitrage. He found a new opportunity every 2 or 3 years where it was really cheap and then it got expensive, but he found a new thing. You need to remain open-minded and experimental, because this is not a set it and forget it game. This is a adopt everyday game.
So you just have faith in one thing, the fact that the digital marketing landscape is going to change.
I'd actually argue that Bedrock is email and text, because the cost in any business is acquiring a first-time customer. The gold mine is keeping the customer. So that's where you get into lifetime value. And theoretically, as you have more data, you can say, okay, actually, I'm very confident every customer I acquire, 70% of them will shop with me at least 5 times over the course of 3 years. Maybe I'm willing to acquire them at a loss because I know I'll make the money back, and then a multiple of it because every acquisition after that, it's going to be 10 cents via an email or a text versus $50 from a Facebook post. And who knows, maybe there'll be, maybe I'll need a new chat bot that DMs you on Instagram or TikTok messaging or something. But the point is, once you have people in your ecosystem, learning how to continue to tap them because they already like the product, they've proven that they're in the ecosystem. Continuing to mine them is the bedrock of the business. The acquisition stuff's the super challenging part, but once you have a customer happy, you need to like keep them.
Are you doing email retargeting with just like the Shopify email retargeting tool, or are you sending out an original content newsletter to your email list?
We've changed a lot with email in the past 3 weeks. So originally we used like half Shopify, I call it like default emails that you can tweak, and then a tool called MailChimp. I'm in the process of migrating off MailChimp and going to Attentive. I used to send about 4 emails a month. We're now going to be sending 12 plus emails a month. We did an SMS program only during like Black Friday and Christmas time. We're now launching like a full-time SMS program. So we're really upgrading this kind of communication thing. And there's on the back end a fairly complex decision tree that makes the communication fairly bespoke, because based on how you interact with the emails or how you interact with the pop-up, we pretty quickly establish which products of ours you interact with. Maybe we'll be forwarding you recipes that you can make with those products. Maybe we'll be forwarding you deals specific to those products. Maybe we'll notice, oh, you're in the sports fan category. You always order for like, the Super Bowl or, a playoff game versus, Mother's Day. Again, it's probably a smaller sleeve, but since we're in the process of migrating to Attentive, we are now going to have significantly more bespoke and automated communication with customers. And then like our brand, like the nice thing is it's food. If I was selling deodorant or something, it's harder to be like 4th of July, buy deodorants. But like food, there's like just a lot of natural overlaps of like sporting events, Father's Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving. Like there's just a lot of things to talk about. And so we run a lot of campaigns around different events that are associated with barbecue or associated with like gathering people around for a shared meal.
Last couple questions here. What do you suck at and how do you manage it in your business? Particularly in the early days of your business when there wasn't much of a business behind you.
In the early days, it was digital marketing. I mean, we quite literally lost money on it for months. And eventually I hired an agency and started working on it with them. And I learned a lot about it. I will say now, one of the things I'm bad about, and it's partially volume driven, is actually customer support. And by that, I mean specifically like, it's like the people that send me the email where that's like, where's my order? And I'm like, well, we did send you an automatic email with the tracking number a day ago. And I know it'll arrive in 2 or 3 days. And sometimes I'm just like, if I wake up and there's, 20 of those, I just don't prioritize it as quickly as I should. And it is bad. It's a weakness of mine, and that's why I need to get rid of it, because to me it's super annoying. It's a pain in the ass. I get irritated by it. It's something that I need to like automate or just outsource to like a VA or a part-time person like in the US that I just pay, hourly, and they do it for 5 to 10 hours a week. It's definitely that 1 to 2 hour task a day that I like kick the can on and somewhat ignore, because I rather just focus on making products and selling more rather than like dealing with these ultra niche requests where I know they already have the information.
Next rapid fire question. Every starting entrepreneur is bombarded with advice. What is some of the worst advice and the best advice that you received?
I think there's just a massive difference between like being venture backed and being bootstrapped, and I'm bootstrapped. And I always got irritated, and I still do, whenever someone's like suggestion is like, oh, like why don't you just hire a PR agency? Like connect with this person. Like they're reasonably priced. They're 15 grand a month. I'm like, what do you think this is? And like, especially like now I could like maybe consider that, but like, 2 years ago, what, that's like half our monthly revenue. It's insane. People are just, it's so easy to spend someone else's money. It's very different if it's your money. And I think a lot of people's advice is coming from a perspective of someone else's money and not their money. And if they were in the shoes, they probably wouldn't be giving you that advice. And that's true for like software, influencers, giving away free product, just things that like, it's very hard to find tangible ROI. That's why I love digital marketing. It's very tangible. I view a lot of these other things as add them on when you've got like a ton of free cash to experiment with, but let's scale things that are more tangible and we can define success more easily. Best advice I got was once we started having a little bit of success and I came out of that 8-month period where I was like, in the hellhole, I started talking to like prospective investors, and like I did get a couple verbal offers, or, we're starting to throw around some terms and stuff. I talked to one of my old bosses who was one of these guys who, owned his own business for 30 or 40 years and then cashed out. And he was like, Andrew, I don't get this. You're telling me you're just starting to become profitable and now you want to raise money? Sounds like if you wanted to raise money, you should have done it the last 8 months, but now you don't need them. He's like, just tolerate the pain a little bit longer, like reinvest that cash. But like, just because it's working now and more people are now attracted to you because you're becoming the hot girl at the dance, that's the exact reason you shouldn't give up equity. It's just now starting to work. You're going to kick yourself in the nuts if this plays out the way we think it can, in 8 to 10 years, and you gave away a chunk of the business when those people weren't taking the risk. I can understand if they gave you money on day 1 or day 60 when you are blowing your savings, when you can't afford it. But like now is when you double down. Like you just proved the model. Own the whole thing, or own as much as you can.
Do you have any advice for other entrepreneurs who have been struggling to find success for a long time?
One of the biggest keys to my success, and what I try to tell a lot of people, I find too many people that are trying to do a little bit of everything. And I call it like take the sniper rifle approach versus the shotgun. An example would be for this business. And when I asked the fulfillment center, like I actually asked them before I went, and I said, hey, can you describe to me your most successful customers? And can you describe to me the customers that come here and fail in 6 months and you stop working with them? The one thing that they had in common was this: the people that fail right away are the the guys that try to launch with like 30 products. He said, he was like, I love how like your current size and you only have 3 products. I love how much you did with just one product. If you're bootstrapped and you're a one-man band or a two-man band or a three-man band, like you need to be very targeted and find the 1, 2, 3 things that matter that you can improve and constantly iterate to make it a big success. If you're trying to do 100 things at once, 90 of them are going to be low quality. Maybe a couple are going to be high quality, and that's really going to erode the quality of the business. Or hey, you're going to have 20 products that suck and you throw away one that sells well, and you're gonna lose money when you could have just focused on one product and iterated and made it better and listened to customer feedback and tweaked the packaging. It's hard if you're doing that for 30 products at a time. Simple and focused plans are way better than portfolio-based strategies. We're not a mutual fund. We're not a hedge fund. We're building equity in a single asset that should be best in class at one thing. So find that one thing you want to be the best at.
How do you balance being scrappy and focused with things that are necessary?
Have a best-in-class product with best-in-class service. Everything else you can outsource, and once that product and service has been recognized, you can add margin every year as you start to make money, but just break even and improve the product. And you have to iterate on the product. So like after the first shipment, like an oddly high percentage of the packaging was like tearing, and so I changed how we like packaged it. And then there was issues with like some of the ice, and I realized it's different ice for different destinations. And the fulfillment center, like sometimes they get the order out the next day, but on certain days they get it out a week later. Like these were immediate things that were like going to dictate like the customer's satisfaction. And so I needed to find a way to make like the customer very happy, and I needed to find a way to make sure we were making them happy and making $1. Make $1. And then after that, you could say, okay, like let's bring these things in house, or like if we improve the quality of this, will that increase our TAM? Customer experience, which is product taste and quality and delivery time. For me, it's different depending on what your product is, but just customer experience, you focus on that. Everything else you can figure out later. Because if the customer's happy, the business will grow. If you have great accounting and great fulfillment software, but the customer's not happy, who gives a fuck?
Thanks, man. This was super fun. Thanks for coming, man. Appreciate it. Hopefully we can do this again in a couple years once you've grown 10 times from where you are today and have encountered like a whole new host of problems that have challenged your resilience.
Hey guys, did you know we are in the middle of an algorithm hunger crisis? The algorithm survives on a diet of likes, comments, and subscribes, but it has a bottomless appetite. Like and comment on this video and subscribe to my channel to make sure the algorithm doesn't go to bed hungry tonight. I'll see you in the next one.